Hey friends, how you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud, Win at Life. Today we're studying Daf Samach Zayin, Daf 67 of Masechet Ksubis, friends. Daf 67, friends, what do you want me to tell you about Daf 67? There's some interesting stuff and some complicated stuff. We start off with some stories about the daughter of Nakdimon Ben Gurion, about Nakdimon Ben Gurion himself, which is interesting. Then we have a difficult bit in the middle about the Ksubah, and then we get stuff about like Agaritas about Stokas. So a big mix of a page. It's a very large page. So friends, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go weiter. We also have a whole bunch to do on Daf Samach Vav. I stopped early on Samach Vav because I wanted to get to these. I wanted to start with the Nakdimon Ben Gurion stuff rather than end, because at the end everyone's tired. You know what I'm saying? You're falling asleep already. And I thought this was interesting. So I figured if we start with it, at least when you're still interested, we could do the interesting stuff, and then you'll fall asleep later. Alright, if you're driving, don't fall asleep when you're driving. Let's go weiter. So we're on Daf Samach Vav with Beis, about, 15 lines from the bottom. Tanu Rabbanon, Ma'aseh by the two dots. Tanu Rabbanon, about like 10 lines before it gets wet. Tanu Rabbanon, what else can I say? Tanu Rabbanon, Ma'aseh Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Oh, so there was a Ma'aseh with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Gewaldig. She'irochav al Chomer, that he was riding a donkey, Vayotzim Yerushalayim, and he was leaving Jerusalem. Vayutamida Ma'alchan Achorv, and his students, his pupils, were walking behind him. And she noticed that there was a young woman who was gathering barley from the dung of the animals of Arabs. Came Chirasa also, and when this girl saw Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Nisatva b'Sayris, so she covered herself in her hair, but I guess maybe she covered her face. V'amda l'fanav, I don't know, she covered herself somehow. V'amda l'fanav, and she stood before Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Omerlo, and she said to him, Rebbe Parnaseni, Rebbe, can you give me a shtickle parnase? Can you imagine? Nakdimon ben Gurion, one of the three wealthy men of Jerusalem, here's his daughter collecting barley kernels from animal dung, and standing before Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and saying, can you give me some tzedakah? Omar lo, he said to her, Biti miat. He says to her, who are you? Omar lo, bas Nakdimon ben Gurion oni. She says, I'm the daughter of Nakdimon ben Gurion. Omar lo, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says to her, Biti, my daughter, Maman shel beis avich, heichon halach. Where did the wealth of your father's house go? Omerlo, she said to him, Rebbe lo chedein maslim b'Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem, don't they, metaphor the following metaphor, give the following parable, melach mamon chaser, that the salt that preserves wealth is chaser, is giving it away, is tzedakah. V'amila chesed, some say, chesed, good deeds. And she was saying that her father didn't give enough charity, and for that reason her father lost everything. And where is the wealth of your in-laws, of your father-in-law? Amrlo, she said to him, look, all of their wealth, my father-in-law, everybody's wealth was tied up together in the same investments or whatever, and when it went sour, mamish, my father lost everything, my father-in-law lost everything, and her mom should have nothing left. And she was a widow, oichet. She was oichet, a widow. Amrlo, and she says to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rebbe, zocher ato kishechasamta ksubasi, do you remember when you signed on my marriage contract? Amrlo, and he said to the Talmidav, he said to his students, zocher ani kishechasamta ksubasho sozo, I remember signing her marriage contract. Vayisi koreba, and I read, elef alfim dinare zov mi beis avua, thousands, what's that, like 1,000,000 golden coins from her father, chutz mishal chamia, and that was separate from the dowry from her father-in-law. No, I'm sorry, the tosefes of her father-in-law, right? Her father brought in a dowry of 1,000,000 gold coins, and her father-in-law committed a tosefes to increase, right, that her chasin would bring in more money into the Ksubit. Where am I? Bach Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai v'Omar. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai then cried and he said, Ashreichem Yisrael, fortunate are you, Israel, Bizman she'esin ritzeni shel makom, when they're doing the will of God, ein kol umma v'lushin sholetes boin. When they're doing the will of God, no nation can rule over them. But however, conversely, when they're not doing the will of the Eibishter, then the Eibishter gives them over to a lowly nation, not just a lowly nation, but to the animals of a lowly nation. And there's the daughter of Nakdimun ben Gurion collecting barley kernels from the dung of animals. Nakdimun ben Gurion lo'avet tzedakah. Now the Gemara says, well, and say, wait a second. Is this really true? Nakdimun ben Gurion lost all of his wealth because he didn't give charity? But Tanya, we learned in a brayso, all about Nakdimun ben Gurion, they said about Nakdimun ben Gurion, when he would leave his house to go to the Beis HaMedrash, they would put these sort of, I guess, mats of like fine wool under his feet for him to walk on. And as he would walk, the poor people would chaparine these fine wool things, and they would have parnasa, right? They would be able to get tzedakah from that. So what do you mean he didn't give charity? He was giving charity all the time. Well, either you could say he did it for his own honor, meaning he was the wealthy man. Sure, he gave tzedakah to the poor people. There's no doubt about that. But, the main thing was that not that the poor people were collecting this fine wool, but that he was walking on fine wool, and yeah, sure. I guess he gives it to them also, but it's definitely very empowering to be that person who's walking on the fine wool, and sure, he's okay with everybody taking it. If anything, it just boosts his image. So you could say that sure, he gave this tzedakah, but he really gave the tzedakah for sort of as a positive reflection upon himself. Or if you want, I will say, or maybe you could say, no, Imamish did give a lot of tzedakah, but not enough tzedakah. Tzedakah is relative. That as people say, that based on how much the camel can handle, that's how much you should load him up with. And therefore, if he was so wealthy, then he should have given more than he did. Tani, we learn in the Brayso, Rabbi Elazar ben Tzadik, Erev ben Nechomim lo re'isiya, says Rabbi Elazar that he saw the daughter of Nakdimun ben Gurion, she'oisa melaketes soirim mibein talfei susim ba'akwa, that she was collecting barley from between the hoofs of horses in Akko. Karaisi alea mikrazeh, and I read upon her the following verse: Im lo seidi lach hayafa banoshim, if you don't pay attention, the drush is that if you don't pay attention to do the right thing, tzilach bikvei atzon uriyes k'diyosaich, then you're going to go out in the hooves of the sheep and take care of your goats. Don't read it your goats, but rather your bodies, that she's going to be searching in the hooves of these animals, looking for barley to eat. Right? Barley is kind of the lower kind of grain, right? Wheat is usually what people eat. Barley is usually for animals. Here she is, the daughter of Nakdimun ben Gurion, searching for little kernels of barley and dung in hoofs and in sort of the worst places. Okay, friends, you got your brains out? Maybe I should stretch a little bit. I gotta get my brain out. Oh, man. Alright, here we go. Alright. Maybe we'll give a babble yawn. Oh, man, a babble yawn. Alright. Here we go. Alright, friends. You got your brains out? Let's do it. Alright. Rabbi Shem bar Abba Rabbi Yochanan. It says Rabbi Shem bar Abba in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Hichnisa lo zav, if she brings in pieces of gold. So as part of her dowry, she brings pieces of gold. Shaman also, vayu kishivyo, and they evaluate it at its worth, right? Not at a markup of 50%, not at a markdown of 20%. I mean, it's really a third, right? A markup of a third, but a third is really a half that you add on to it, and then Memela it's a third of the outcome. 50%, right? If it's 1,000, so they add 500. And then it becomes 1,500. So the 500 that you added, 500 is a third of 1,500. We know this. Anyways, but I just go with 50% because I think it's easier for us to think about. 50% of 1,000 is 500. What do you want me to tell you? That's what you add on. So, right, but also if it was like things that you evaluate, so you evaluate it at 20% marked down. So if it was 1,000, it would be 800. So now, but it says of Shem Barab, the name of Yochanan, Ichnisa lo zav, that if she brings in gold, pieces of gold, Shaman also, so they evaluate it, at face value. So if she brought in pieces of gold that were worth $1,000, so then he writes down in the Ksuba that the dowry is $1,000. Fine. Meisvei, Vakasha. Hazov, when it comes to gold, Harehu kekelim. So if a price that says that gold is like vessels. My lav kekelim shel kesef depachte. So mistam, it's like silver vessels that decrease in value, and therefore they should be at a markdown of 20%. So why does Reb Shem Bar Abba say the name of Reb Yochanan that these gold pieces are evaluated at face value if we have a price that seems to be saying that these gold pieces are treated like silver vessels, i.e. there's a 20% markdown? Lo kekelim shel zav de lo pachte. No, they're treated like golden vessels. Treated like golden vessels that do not decrease in value. And therefore, okay, so if it's $1,000 worth of gold pieces, so therefore we write in $1,000 into the Ksuba, and the Bryce is saying that they are like these gold vessels that maintain their value, so we write it down at face value. Imkain, kechelav mi boile, fact the Gemara. But if the Bryce, when it says that gold is like vessels, it means like gold vessels, i.e. face value, but then it should say not kekelim, but kekelav. That zav is kekelav. That zav, gold, is like vessels made from itself, made from gold. But it doesn't say, it says kekelim, which implies silver vessels. Ve'od, emor so Tanya. We have a brayse. What does the brayse say? Taka tosefta. Zav, when it comes to gold, hareu kekelim. Okay, gold is like vessels. Okay. Dinrei zav, when it comes to gold coins, harein kichsofim, they're like money. They're considered like money, i.e. like cash, that we add 50%. Okay. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, Omer says Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, b'makom shenagu shelo leforton, and we're going to have to figure out what he's talking about, but in a place where they don't lefrot, where they don't break it, transfer it onto money, right? So if you have these gold, if you have this gold, and they don't, imagine you go to Shuk Machne Yehuda with some gold right now. What are they going to do with that? Maybe they'll chav, but you can't exactly pay for things with gold. I mean, maybe they'd be happy to take, you'd have to basically turn it into shkolim, into shekels, and then go to Shuk Machne Yehuda and buy pizza, whatever you want. You know what I bought today? It's not important. Okay. Well, what is important is that I want more coffee. So if the minig is not to transfer them to money, so then so then we pay face value. Now Rav Shimon Gamliel aheya. When Rav Shimon Gamliel says that if they don't transfer the gold onto usable cash, so then we pay face value and not a 50% markup. Aheya, what's he talking about? Ilema Seifa. If he's talking about the Seifa, what does it say in the Seifa? Well, the Seifa had said, Dinrei zav arein kichsofim, that dinars of zav, that these golden coins, these golden dinars, are considered like cash, considered like money. And Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is saying that, well, but if they're not usable as cash, right? Meaning, right, if they're not usable as cash, well, then we pay them, then we evaluate them at face value. Well, that then implies that according to the Tanakama, even though they're not usable as cash, you still have a 50% markup on them. Right? So, Yilema Aseifa Michlal the Tanakama, so that implies that the Tanakama holds, Afilu b'makom shnagu shelo lefortin, that even in a place where it's not usable as cash, halo nafke, right? Meaning, the fortin, still there would be a 50% markup, but halo nafke, how could there be a 50% markup if it's not actually usable as cash? So, Elalav Aresha. So rather, it's going on the first part of the brisa, which says, Zov arei kikelim, which says that vessels are considered like, that gold pieces are considered like vessels. And this is what it's saying. Zov arei kikelim, that gold is considered like vessels, my kelim. What does it mean, vessels? Kelim shel kesef, silver vessels. That the Tanna Kama is saying that gold pieces are considered like silver vessels, i.e. there's a 20% markdown. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says, that actually we treat these silver pieces like golden coins in places where they're not able to be used as cash, i.e. face value. So we see that the Tanna Kama is saying that gold pieces are treated like silver vessels, i.e. a 20%, pieces of gold have a 20% markdown. I think markdown means that we decrease the value by 20%. If not, assume that it means it at least for while we're listening to Babylon Talmud. So the Tanna Kama is saying that gold pieces have a 20% markdown. That the gold pieces are still considered like silver vessels. Whereas Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says that they are at face value. So how could Reb Shem bar Abba be saying the name Reb Yochanan that silver pieces are evaluated at face value if the Tanna Kama is saying that silver pieces are considered like how can we say that gold pieces are evaluated at face value? How can Reb Shem bar Abba say the name Reb Yochanan that gold pieces are evaluated at face value if the brisa, the Tanna Kama, is saying that gold pieces are considered like silver vessels that have a 20% markdown? The La'olam HaSeifa, we say no, really Reb Shimon ben Gamliel is going on the second part of the brisa when it says that that dinarim are zav, that golden coins are considered like cash. V'denafke aidei adchak. But it's talking about situations where they're usable as cash if you need to use it as cash, right? I don't know, imagine, okay, I don't know what to imagine, but you have these golden coins and we're talking about a situation where they could be used as a cash, as cash, but only when it's completely necessary. And this is the machlokas, that the Tanna Kama says, look, since at the end of the day, they're usable as cash, so we give it a 50% markup. Whereas Reb Shimon ben Gamliel holds that since you can only use them as cash in pressing situations, we treat it at face value. Okay, fine. But we could still say that the Tanna Kama is talking about, golden vessels. Alternatively, it's all Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, and there's some missing words. You have to kind of tweak the brisa in the following way. Zov areu kechelim, that gold is considered like golden vessels, i.e. at face value, like Reb Shem bar Abba is saying. Din rezov, when it comes to golden coins, right? So golden pieces are like golden vessels, that they are at face value. Golden coins, harein kichsofim, they're considered like cash, and they have a 50% markup. When do we say this? In places where they're usable as cash, but where they are not used as cash, and then we just evaluate them at face value. That's Reb Shimon ben Gamliel's opinion. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says, that in places where the minig is not to use them as cash, so then we just evaluate them at face value. But still, even if you want to say that this brisa is all entirely Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, and we're saying that it's talking about golden vessels, but what about the kichelav question that we asked, right? That zav areu kichelim, shouldn't it say kichelav, that golden pieces are considered like vessels made from gold? But it doesn't say, it says kikelim. So kasha, we say it's taka a good kasha, but if you want, I could say, you know what, it is talking about silver vessels. You know what, gold pieces are like silver vessels. So how could it be that Reb Shimon bar Abba is saying the name of Reb Yochanan that gold pieces are evaluated at face value if we have a price that's saying that they're like silver vessels, that they decrease in value, and therefore he does it, he writes it down at at a 20% markdown. Then it's talking about gold that kind of breaks apart, or gold dust, right? Meaning when Reb Shimon bar Abba says that it's face value, that's proper gold. But that would be face value. But when we say that it's a 20, right, it's like silver vessels at a 20% markdown. So that would be if it's like gold that's falling apart, or if it's like gold dust or whatever. Alright, that was complicated, very dense, but the takeaway is that Reb Shimon bar Abba says that proper gold pieces would be recorded at face value, not with a 20% markdown or with a 50% markup. Omer Reb Yanai, it says Reb Yanai, B'som shel antuchya, fragrances of antuchya, Harei ein kichsofim, they are treated like cash, because it's like their main trade thing. It's considered like cash at a 50% markup. Omer Reb Shmuel bar Nachmani, Omer Reb Yochanan, says Reb Shmuel bar Nachmani in the name of Reb Yochanan, Gmalim shel Aravia, camels of Arabia, Ishagova Painameim, there's a 50% markup. Omer Reb Papi, Hani Tosve de Vemichse, the clothing of Bemichse, Ishagova Painameim, also have a 50% markup. Omer Papi, says Reb Papi, Ani Sake de Rudia, the sacks of Rudia, the Ashlik de Kimchunya, and the ropes of Kimchunya, Ishagova Painamein, also has a 50% markup. Amar Rava, says Rava, unrelated. Mereish Avamina, initially I thought, Hani Arnike de Machoza, these money pouches in Machoza, that since Machoza was like a wealthy town and there was a lot of money around, Ishagova Painamein, so she could collect her Ksubis, right? We can consider this money to be the equivalent of Karka, that she can collect her Ksubah from money in Machoza. My time, how come? Asmachtayu alayu, because they rely upon cash in Machoza, just like they would rely upon property in other places. Came the Chazoy, the Shakle Lehu, Vinafke. But since, says Rava, when he saw that the women who would get divorced or widowed, they would take the money and invested in real estate, he realized that, okay, I see that even in Machoza, really the ikar is the properties, the real estate, and he stopped relying upon these money bags as ksubah payments. Says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, bito stam, if a fellow marries off his daughter stam, I guess without mentioning and without noting any specific dowry or something, he should at least commit to 50 zuzes. If he said, if he only committed to committing his daughter to the marriage naked, not coming in with anything, the husband should not say, the husband shouldn't say, okay, I'll wait till after we're married and then I'll buy her clothing. Ella he immediately starts, you should immediately, if the father is not bringing her into the marriage with anything, he should already, from the time he's engaged, start buying her stuff, clothing. If the community is marrying off a orphan girl, they should not commit less than 50 zuzes for her dowry. Now, if the contributions allow for it, so then give her commit even more money to her dowry, as much as is befitting her. Says the Gemara, Amar Abaye 50 zuzei pshite. Says the Bible, when we say 50 zuz, we're talking about the simple 50 zuz, not the more expensive 50 zuz. Apparently, there were two kinds of zuz. One of them was 1/8 of the other one. So we're talking about the less expensive, the less valuable zuzes. How do we know this? From the fact that it says from the fact that we say in the Seifa that when it comes to a Yisoma, if there's enough contributions available, so then we increase her dowry, as much as would be respectful. My kiss, and we say, what exactly is this kiss that we're drawing money from? It's talking about the charity collections. And if it enters your mind to say it means like 50 actual zuzes, not the cheaper zuzes, well then how much are we giving her already, right? Meaning if we're saying that at the very least she brings in 50 proper zuz for her dowry, that's already a respectable amount. And if we're saying that if the contributions allow for it, then we even increase it more. I mean, 50 zuz is already a respectable amount. Why should we have to, how much do you want to give her already? Right? Kami yavinula, how much are we giving her already? Rather, it means no, 50 of the cheaper zuzes, and therefore, if financial realities allow, we can increase that amount. The rabbis taught that if you have a orphan boy and an orphan girl who need to be supported from charity, so if we are limited funds, so we first ensure that the female orphan, that the orphan girl is taken care of first, and then the orphan boy, that it's the way of a man to go around begging and not a woman, and therefore we make sure that the orphan girl is taken care of first before the orphan boy, and if there's only enough for one of them, so the orphan boy would be the one to go around begging. Yosem v'yisome shabo linase, when it comes to a orphan boy and an orphan girl that we want to get married, masinas ha'yisome v'achakach masinas ha'yosim. So first we get the orphan girl married, and then the orphan boy, because the embarrassment of a girl is more than that of a boy. Tanar Rabbanan, the rabbis taught Yosem shabalisa, that a orphan boy who's getting married, sochin lo bayis, so we rent for him a house, matzin lo mita, and we prepare for him a bed, v'chokle tashmisha, and everything that he needs, v'achakach matzin lo isha, and then we marry him off to a girl. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, de machzor asher yechzor lo, that we provide for him anything that he's lacking. De machzor, when it says what he's lacking, ze abayis, that's the house. Amr asher yechzor, that he is lacking, ze mita v'shulchan, that's a bed and a table. Lo, to him, zo isha, that is a wife. V'cheinu omer, and it also says lo, es lo, ezer kenegdo. It says by Adam and Chava that he will make lo for him in ezer kenegdo. So we see that a wife is referred to as lo. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught de machzoro atom mitzuva olav l'fanaso, that the rabbis taught what he's lacking, we need to provide him. V'atam mitzuva olav l'osho, but we don't need to make him rich. Asher yechzer lo, that which is lacking, right? That which he's missing. So even if it means a horse for him to ride, if he's missing that, so provide him a horse. And a evid to run before him. They said about Hillel Azakin Shalkach Lo'ani ben Tuvim, that when he was helping out a poor fellow who comes from an aristocratic family, and Hillel Azakin made sure that there was a horse for this fellow to ride. The Evid loads the fun of it, and an Evid to run before him. Pamachas lomotza, Evid loads the fun of. One time we didn't find an Evid to run before the fellow. V'rotz the fun of Shlosha Milan. So Hillel Azakin himself ran before this Ani ben Tuvim 3 mil. There was taka maise with the people in the Upper Galilee. That they purchased for a pauper who comes from an aristocratic family. So for this fellow, he was in Tzipori, litra basar b'chol yom, a litra of meat every day. Litra basar ma'irabusa. What's the chiddush? Apparently, a litra of basar is 14 ounces. So they were buying 14 ounces of meat every day. I don't really know what that means, but apparently it's not necessarily that much meat. Rafuna litra basar. So says, I'm sorry. So Rafuna litra basar mishal ofis. So says Rafuna, yeah, but it was bird meat. Bird meat. I don't know what kind of birds, but bird meat. Maybe chicken epis, chveis. So, and that I guess was more expensive. Or it means not that it was 14 ounces of meat, it was 14 ounces of money. 14, right? The weight of the money was 14 ounces, and I guess that's a lot of money. So they would spend a lot of money to buy meat every day. Ravashi Omar, Hasam Kfar Kotinoy, says Ravashi, it was a small city, or it was a small village. And every day they would slaughter an entire animal just for this one person, even though he couldn't even eat all of it. But they would go out of their way to make sure that he had what he needed. There was a fellow who came before Reb Nechemia Amalei, and Reb Nechemia said to the fellow, what are you accustomed to eating? He said, I'm accustomed to eating fatty meat and old wine. Rabbi Nechemia says, look, I've got lentils. Do you want lentils? Gilgal imo ba'adashim. He says, fine, okay, I'll eat lentils. Vames. And then he died. And then Rabbi Nechemia says, oy vavoy, this guy just got killed. It shouldn't say, woe to this fellow who just died. It should say, woe to Nechemia who just killed him with his lentils. So the Gemara says, no, Rabbi Nechemia didn't do anything wrong. Rabbi Nechemia didn't do anything wrong. This fellow, I don't know, I guess he shouldn't have been pampering himself so much. I don't know if it means on other people's bill or just in general to get to the point where he sort of needed, fatty meat and old wine in order to survive. So it wasn't Rabbi Nechemia's fault. Also, a certain fellow came before Rava. Rava says to the fellow, what do you normally eat? I normally eat fatty birds and old wine. To which Rava says, I don't understand. You're relying, you're being supported by public funds. Aren't you concerned that you are taking advantage of the public funds to support your fatty birds and old wine? The fellow says, what, do you think that I'm eating from public funds? No way, no how. I'm eating from the Eibishter. The Tanina, as we learn in the Mishnah, the pasuk says that everybody's eyes turn to you and you give everybody what they need to eat. Doesn't say at their times, but at his time, singular, that every single fellow knows in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Eibishter gives him what he needs to survive. And guess what happened? Out of the blue, Rav's sister comes, who he hasn't seen in 13 years, and guess what she brought with her? A fatty bird and old wine. Rav is like, what in the world? What's like a phrase that they say when you are like, holy moly, or like, what's the word? Is like, I don't know. What's like the word when you say like I'd be damned or something like that? You know, the Rav is like, holy moly. Here's this guy in my living room who's saying that he needs food to eat, saying that he needs fat, that he normally eats fatty birds and old wine, and I'm saying, and you rely on public funds for this, and he says, no, the Eibishter hands it to me, and out of nowhere, his sister, Rav's sister, he hasn't seen in 13 years, comes with fatty birds and old wine. So Rav was like, I'm sorry for second guessing you. You are 100% right. The Eibishter does somehow take care of you very well. Please enjoy. If a fellow doesn't have any money, but he also doesn't feel comfortable accepting charity, so we give it to him as a loan. We say, we're not giving you tzedakah, we're giving you a loan. But then once he's accepted as a loan, we can then gift it to him. So we don't expect to get it back. That's what Meir's opinion. The Chacham say, give it to him as a gift, and then give it to him as a loan. What do you mean give it to him as a gift? The whole point is he doesn't want to accept charity. He doesn't want to accept the gift. Rabbi says, to offer it to him initially as a gift. Let me just make sure that's correct. Yeah, that's right. That we initially offer it to him as a gift. Fine. Let me just make sure I'm not skipping anything. Yesh lov also the Spanish. If you have a fellow who can afford it, he has money, but he's not interested in spending it. He has money, he can afford it, but he's not interested in spending it, so he basically starves. So nosin lo the shumatana, so we give it to him as a gift, but then we give it to him as a gift, and then we collect it from him. But if we go back and collect it from him, then he's not going to take it anymore. After he dies, we go and chap it around because he could have afforded it the whole time. Reb Shimon says, Reb Shimon, yeshlo, if you have a fellow who can afford it but doesn't want to pay for anything, we just ignore him. If he doesn't have it and he doesn't want to accept charity, we say to him, have mashkon, so at least so bring a collateral vitol. Right? So if he doesn't have any money, but he also doesn't want to accept charity, we say, you know what? Give us a collateral and we'll give you the money. When you pay it back, you get back the collateral. So at least like this, he's not accepting handouts. He doesn't feel like he's accepting handouts. Lend, that's a fellow who doesn't have, and he doesn't feel comfortable accepting charity. That we give it to him as a loan. And then we give it to him as a gift after the fact. You shall surely lend. This is a fellow who can afford it, but he doesn't want to spend his money. That we give it to him as a gift. And then we pay it back, we chop it back around from him after he dies. The Chacham say, if you have a fellow who has money but doesn't want to support himself, we can just ignore him. So what do we do with the pasuk that says that you shall surely lend him? The Torah is just speaking in sort of normal matters of speech, which is which I guess is a normal way of saying lend. There was a poor fellow in his neighborhood. And every day, Mar Ukva would leave 4 zuz at this fellow's doorstep. And one day, this poor fellow says, look, I got to figure out who's doing me this favor. That day, Mar Ukva was staying late and learning at the Beis HaMedrash. And then his wife came to meet him at the Beis HaMedrash. And then when this poor fellow saw that Mar Ukva and his wife were coming towards his doorstep, he went after them, wrote mikame, and then Mar Ukva and his wife ran away from this fellow. Grufa Nura, and Mar Ukva and his wife jumped into an oven that the coals had been swept out of it. Havaka Mikalyun Kare de Mar Ukva, and Mar Ukva's feet were like cooking, not so good. Omra Le Devisu Shkokaich Oseva Karoi, and his wife says, put your feet on my feet. Mar Ukva then started to feel bad. He's like, I don't understand. I'm sitting in the Beis HaMedrash learning all day. My wife's merits seem to be greater than mine, that my feet are burning in this oven, and my wife seems to be doing just fine. Amra Le, she said to him, don't worry. She says, look, I'm home all day, and when the poor people come to the house, I'm able to give her things that they can benefit from immediately. Meat, bread, things that they can eat immediately. Whereas you give them money, which is amazing, but they have to then go out and buy stuff. It's not ready to be, it's a means to an end, but it's not an end in and of itself. How come they went to such drastic measures to jump in an oven? To Amr Mazutra, Bar Tuvia, Amarav, Amrila, Amrafuna, Bar Bizna, Amrav Shimon Chasida, Amrila, Amrav Yochel, Shimon Ben Yochai, Nochel, Adam Shim Yimso Atzma, L'soch Kivshon Aish, that it is better for a fellow to put himself in a fiery furnace, Vayabim Pnei Chaver Barabim, rather than to embarrass one's friend in public. Minolan, how do we know this? Mitomer, from Tomer, Tichsiv Himutzes, that it says by Yehuda and Tomer that she was willing to be burnt at the stake rather than to publicly reveal that Yehuda had slept with her, thinking that she was a harlot. She was willing to go to the grave and be burnt rather than to embarrass Yehuda. Mar Ukva, Hava Ani b'Shevevusei. Mar Ukva, there was a certain poor fellow in his neighborhood. Davarogl Shadurle Abemei Zuzei Komaila Yom Dekipure, and every Erev Yom Kippur he would send to this fellow 400 zuz. Yom Achad Shadrinu Niale Biad Brei, and one day Mar Ukva sent 400 zuz with his son. Also Omarle, his son came and said to Mar Ukva, Lo tzarich, the fellow doesn't need it. Amar my chazis. So Mar Ukva says, why? What did you see to indicate that he doesn't need it? I saw that they were, using wine, yain yosher, that they were using old wine as a fragrance in the house. So Mar Ukva says, wow, he's so pampered, we have to give him twice as much. When Mar Ukva was dying, He says, bring me my ledger, my charity ledger. And he saw that it was written in the ledger 7,000 sianke dinars. He says, look, I'm dying, I'm going on a long journey, and I don't have enough rations. I didn't give enough tzedakah. And he then committed half of all of his the money that he had to charity. But didn't they say that in Usha they established that you shouldn't give more than 20% of your wealth to charity? So we say, yeah, but that's when he's alive. He shouldn't give more than 20% of his wealth to charity, because what if he has a downturn? That could be risky. But if he's about to die, so then he can give more than that. Friends, that was Daf Samach Zayin of Masechet Ksubis. It was talking interesting daf. The first part of the daf we learned about Nakdimun ben Gurion and how he lost everything, which is pretty, like mamish everything, which is pretty crazy. We then saw the opinion of Reb Shem Bar Abu, quoted Reb Yochanan, that golden, pieces of gold could be treated like at face value. We had kind of a whole discussion around that, and then we basically got involved in basically stories about charity, which is kind of interesting. Friends, peace out, bye.